Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Equipped, Bruised, Tired podcast. I am one of your hosts, Bryce Krawczyk, and I'm here with my good friend and fellow lifter, Ryan Stinn. And yeah, that's a podcast intro.
Thanks for calling me a fellow lifter. That makes me feel good.
I was
barely been doing much lifting.
I was trying to come up with some sort of prestigious title, and that was the best that came to the top of my mind. I'm like, wait, what are we? Who are we?
He lifts weights sometimes.
I mean, that's why we're all here, right?
Mostly.
So how's training been going, Ryan?
Well, I just started a new dev block this week, so it's fun to get off the pivot block and got some singles on bench again. So raw bench, we'll see if we can maybe push that PRs a little higher. Maybe, I don't know. Started with a 205 today, so felt pretty good.
Oh, that's a fair bit above where you started last block, right? You were in the 190s to start with?
Yeah, I don't know if it was 192 or 197 last block, but yeah, definitely a little bit higher. So, and then did some triples at 192, so which is I'm pretty sure the most I've ever tripled. So yeah, it was good. And then I did some really exciting split squats, up to 40 kilos, in keeping with the decision to try and do some single leg work to make me healthy again.
Right.
As I'm doing 40 kilo split squats, I'm thinking, yeah, Bryce and Eric, they're both like pulling 800 pounds for reps, and I'm split squatting 40 kilos. So, to each their own. Different methods, I guess.
Yeah. We all are headed in the same direction, I think. The vehicle we take is slightly different.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's otherwise been good. So exciting, interesting stuff. This block, I think Mike prescribed my single leg work as basically choose your own adventure from 8 to 40 reps at an 8 to a 9. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So you could do like 8 singles at 9 or something if you wanted?
No, 8 reps to 40 reps. So
per set.
That's right. So 4 sets of 8 to 40 reps.
So you just kind of go till you feel it.
I'm not going to ever get to that 40. Let me just be honest with you.
I feel like
that's just not going to happen.
An insanely high top end for that.
Yeah, but I'm glad he gave me that option, I guess.
I suppose. I wonder if anybody's ever taken him up on that and been like, yep, I did 6 sets of 40.
40 step-ups or something.
Yeah, like body weight stuff or something.
Yeah. I walked up and down the stairs. There you go. That's what I did. That was my set, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, so, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. We'll see where this goes, and hopefully I can get some things working better and get back doing some bilateral work next block. So, how about you? You're
dedicated a full block to the single leg stuff?
Yeah, and I assume we'll stick it out for a whole 6-week usual cycle since we're doing normal bench stuff here, and we'll see where that goes. And with the likeliness of competing, who knows when.
Yeah.
I suppose if things start looking more solid for Worlds, we might maybe try it. And things start feeling good for me, I guess I'll try and switch to something more focused, maybe a little sooner. But yeah, I don't know. Play it by ear.
Makes sense. Maybe push for some big split squat PRs by the end of the block or something.
Yeah, exactly. A little 1RM. Sorry, Mike, I was supposed to do 8 to 40 reps, but I did a 1RM on split squats instead.
Respect.
I think that's something that Mike Boyle would really be into, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who Mike Boyle is, but
I feel like I recognize the name, but I'm falling short.
Yeah, he's a coach down in the States, and he's a big proponent of rear foot elevated split squats, also known as Bulgarian split squats. So yeah, he's big on doing those heavy, I think. So
I think Cal Dietz was a big proponent of those too. Yeah. He was saying that people just like took their back squat up like 300 pounds from doing just like eccentric single leg SSB split squats.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
Like I don't know. I think I've heard him talk about them in that light a few times, but
yeah.
How's
your training?
Training for me has been, I trained twice this week.
Oh.
So 2 out of my 3 sessions so far. Anyways, it's still Sunday. I could maybe redeem myself. Yeah, just been kind of feeling pretty low motivation, honestly, pretty distracted and not really having my head in the game. So next week I'll try to get all 3 sessions in because I got a 2-week washout here. So But after really kind of blowing it out in that last week, and hitting the all-time squat PR and big bench PR and big deadlift double, I just was left kind of like, oh man, I got a couple of aches and pains and some things that I think just rest might be the best idea for some of these. So
Yeah.
I've been taking it pretty damn easy. Yeah, I mean, nothing really of note in terms of training. Just kind of been going through the motions a little bit. So start turning things back around this next week, and then be ready for a new dev block the following.
Yeah, I think that's something that lots of people kind of, especially newer lifters, take for granted, that sometimes you're not really, it's not like a motivational video when you're going to train. It's just like, yeah, I just got to go put the work in, right? So
Yeah.
that's how it is, especially when you have like big blowouts like that. Like it's tough to carry that into, especially a pivot block or a washout. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And especially if you're aching and paining a little bit, so make things feel better.
Just had a couple of things that I think needed a little bit of a break. That last block was super productive, and in most cases was the most weight I've handled raw in a number of years. So I think it took its toll a little bit, and I'd like to be able to be productive the next time I get into more serious training again. So
will you be back in gear?
I don't know. Mike and I don't think have had that conversation. I've said it on here, I think, before, but I'd be open to doing some shirted stuff and deadlift suit stuff, but I'm not sure I'd be cool squatting in my full suit. Maybe some wraps, maybe.
Straps down.
I feel like that's just worse. That's just more risky.
It's so funny because I really have a soft spot for straps down work.
I know a number of people who do, yeah.
Yeah. It's not terrible to me. Actually, I find it to be a really good way to acclimatize my upper back to handling the heavier loads.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
To be fair, I did it once as part of a warm up and was like, "This is the worst," and have never done it again.
Well, maybe give it a little more shot than that, but
perhaps, yeah, maybe there's something there that I haven't quite sussed out. You said we had a question today.
Yeah, we got one question to our email.
Answer. So we'll take a look at that.
Mike R, we'll say Michael R. He had a question about cutting the material off of a bench shirt sleeve to make it shorter. So if you have long sleeves that's hanging below your elbow, and instead of having to like jam it up to be above your elbow or pull the back of the shirt up to be above your elbow, he's wondering if you can cut that and still have it be IPF USAPL approved. And I think that's
get that custom done by the manufacturer, right?
I would think that is the official word. But reading the rules, it does say that you can make modifications along an original seam. And at one point they did have unwritten rule or something like that said you could not shorten sleeves, that had manufacturer had to do that. But to me, this would fall under being an original seam modification.
Right.
And I'll just say that I know people have done it and have done it themselves or had a seamstress do it. And if you get it done in the same fashion, right. So the stitching looks the same.
So that it follows essentially the same pattern as what the manufacturer would have done. Yeah.
No one's really going to know the difference. Let's be honest with that. Right. I'm not saying that's the rule. I'm just saying that I know people that do it. Now myself, I just jam the extra material up above the elbow.
Right. You can just kind of bunch it up to make the sleeve effectively shorter.
Yeah.
But you still have the extra material.
It does tend to get a little pinchy with that, but I just find it easier to do that rather than trying to get my sleeves shortened all the time. Because I don't know if I have really short humeruses. I don't know what the plural of humerus is, but I've always had an issue with sleeves being too long for me. I think I wear my sleeves a little low too. So that's why I tend to have to push the material above my elbow. But I think as long as it looks the same and you're not really changing the structure of the shirt, then it shouldn't have any issue with it being approved still. Now, I do know if you order a shirt from Titan, you can just ask them to have the sleeves shortened and they'll do that for you.
Right.
I have done that in the past as well. So the same with, I think Inzer will do the same thing. I've had the sleeves ordered, shortened. So Yeah, it
Well,
shouldn't be an
I've
issue.
seen people with custom shirts with the sleeves quite short before.
Yeah,
But I think that was something that they had done by Titan
right.
as part of like a custom shirt. Yeah, and I don't even really have much to say on that because I've never approached or navigated that question before. So I think that about sums it up there.
I would say if you have someone that can adequately do the work and keep it, as original as possible, you should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
I've been through a lot of equipment checks, and I've never had someone closely inspect my hemming on my shirt sleeves. I have actually seen someone lift with an unhemmed shirt sleeve before, but
Really?
that is illegal. You definitely have to have that, I think, folded back over to be original.
Right. So that it mimics that original design.
Yeah, I would say it's probably safer to having that rather than having the frayed end there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen it get away. I've get through equipment check before, so. But yeah, that was our only real question this week. So if you have any more, feel free to shoot us an email at equippedbrewstired@gmail.com or leave one on our YouTube or just send me or Bryce something on Instagram. I'm Stindler on Instagram and STINNDLER. And Bryce is obviously Bryce_CBB.
Yep, that's the one.
So yeah, reach out if you have some questions.
Sweet. All right. And with that, we'll toss it over to our interview. Our guest today really, I don't think needs much of an introduction. We had the pleasure of sitting down with Mike Tuchscherer for a good little chat. We went through a number of things, including going through some of the sort of nuances of equipped programming. He backed me up that reps and gear are good. So y'all can just chew on that before you even get started here. Yeah, so I think that one of the things I really enjoyed about our combo with Mike was that we got to talk to him more about being an athlete. I think was something that we were able to touch on a lot with him and his experiences as an athlete and learning equipment when there was a time or during a time where there was not a lot of other resources. So kind of wading through all of the conventional information, figuring out what worked for him, and which has led to, I think, the way that he programs maybe a little bit unconventionally for his equipped lifters now. Anyways, Mike's one of the few people who has won the World Games in terms of North American lifters. I think it's a pretty short list. And yeah, is a coach to a great many number of amazing athletes. So yeah, we'll toss it over to that and hope everybody that is tuned in really enjoys the episode. And we'll see everybody in the next one. But yeah, so we're here to talk equipped lifting with one of the guys who's been very, very successful at both coaching and doing the equipped lifting himself. So we're both really excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's kind of a neat opportunity to talk to both of you guys at the same time too. I think it's kind of neat, like just having the Equip podcast and then you guys doing an Equip podcast together. I think is a cool it's a cool vibe.
Yeah, well, especially since I started shaving my head and growing my beard out. So now Ryan and I are pretty much indistinguishable from one another.
Yeah.
Basically, that's why I wear my glasses.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to wear mine on the podcast. So I don't really think you need a whole lot of introduction. I think most people probably know who Mike Tuchscherer is and some of the things that you've managed to do.
If they don't, maybe I can impress them with my wit during the course of this conversation.
There you go. Exactly. You got a reason to Google him afterwards.
Right. There you go.
So we've talked about this with a number of athletes, and we've been fortunate enough to have a number of athletes who have gone. But obviously, one of the big things we wanted to talk about a little bit was your World Games experience. Now, you actually won the World Games, right?
I did. Yeah.
Ryan specifically had a question about how much you liked the hotel, because apparently it was a pretty dope hotel. But maybe you could just kind of like paint the scene for how that went and kind of tell us a little bit about that experience for you.
I mean, as I look back on it now, it was one of those things where I don't know. So that was 2009. So I was 24 at the time. And I look back on it and think, man, I was really kind of too young and dumb to appreciate what was going on. Like, I mean, you know, it's a big deal, but like in hindsight, I look back on it and think like, man, I kind of didn't get it, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, that had been uh, definitely the furthest I'd ever traveled, and one of the earlier international experiences that I'd had, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know, just things that I remember. Some things seemed strange at the time. Like I remember the hotel. You mentioned the hotel. I don't remember too much about it being nice or not nice, but I remember thinking that, um, like in the bathroom, there was like a shower head, but there wasn't like a shower. You know, it was like a drain in the middle of the floor. And I remember thinking like how weird that was. I mean, I guess it is kind of strange, but that wouldn't make me like that wouldn't make the notes at this point in my life, you know.
Right.
But that was part of the notes, I guess. You
Come
guys
down for
wouldn't believe
breakfast. Like,
this,
yeah, you
right?
guys see that?
But, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it was. Go ahead, then.
the only thing I remember about the hotel, and I think athlete rooms were probably better. Like I went as a coach. So myself and the other Canadian coach were in a room together, and we had like almost like bunks sort of thing. Like there's like 4 little shelves you kind of slept on, and yeah, I remember it was the first hotel I'd ever been with. Like that was just like hard like tile floor, and there's just a smell throughout the whole hotel that like it's still kind of burned into my brain, and yeah, I don't know. It was also my first time ever traveling outside of Canada, so that's probably why it's so ingrained in me. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I remember. And I remember walking to the other hotel, whatever it was called, for the lunch buffet, and being like, man, some people get to stay at this hotel. This is way nicer than our hotel.
See, I don't think that the hotel I was at was, I don't know, anything really all that special, but I do remember that they had volunteers from the local university that were posted down in the lobby like 24/7 who would do translation, who would order you a taxi if you needed to go somewhere, just generally there to help, you know. And in a place where the language barrier, so that was, I don't know if we said yet, but that was in Kaohsiung City in Taiwan. And the language barrier for all of us was pretty stark. So that was really, really helpful and thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm literally still friends with some of those volunteers on Facebook and
Right?
Instagram. Yeah, like it's crazy.
So one of the people from that trip, so my wife Ayana didn't go on that trip, um, but she is somehow Facebook friends with one of the volunteers who was there, and that's like her only friend on Facebook that she doesn't know like for real in real life.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's like that
awesome.
one person in Taiwan.
So you mentioned it there, but you were 24 when you did that?
Was, yeah.
And so how long, like just to kind of paint a timeline here, how long into your lifting career was that? Was that pretty early on that you found that much success and kind of like you could call it a sort of meteoric rise? Or like had you been chipping away for 15 years already competing and that kind of stuff?
I was kind of, I suppose it depends a lot on definitions for different things. So I started lifting when I was 12 and found myself to be pretty good at it pretty early on. I didn't compete though. There were a couple like competitions between football teams that, you know, aren't really anything. But my first real competition wasn't until I got into college. So I would have been, you know, 18, 19 years old by the time I did my first competition. And I went through like my collegiate years, honestly bombing out a lot. So I went to collegiate nationals all 4 years that I was in college and bombed out 3 times. So 3 out of 4 years bombed out of collegiate nationals, and had to go to junior nationals 1 year. It's kind of a workaround to try to get to the junior world competition. But I mean, I chalk that up as being self-taught on a lot of it. Just never had mentors that were close by, and really, like in my university time, I was somewhat close. So the Air Force Academy is in Colorado Springs, and that's about an hour drive from Denver. And Dan Gaudreau lives in Denver, and Blaine talks about Dan, that Dan helped bring up Blaine as well. So occasionally I would make the trip up to Denver to get help from Dan, but it's a combination of like going 2 to 3 times a year is just not that much, and also thinking that a lot of stuff when you're 20 years old, and you really don't know as much as you think. So it's kind of a lot of those led to some hard lessons in the early years. But I did manage to, I was strong, which is useful, and managed to win some junior national competitions. I went to Junior Worlds in 2006. And so I knew that I could compete at an international level. And then after I left university, that's when I started competing at the open level. And that would have been 2007. So, well, 2008 really. So 2008 is when I started competing in the open. And then 2009 is when I went to the World Games in Taiwan. So that's kind of the competition history, I suppose. So I'd done a fair bit of competing, not a lot successfully.
So what was it about those competitions? Was it consistently one thing that kind of got you, or was it a variety of things throughout those meets?
It was the bench. So bench was always the thing that I had a few close calls squatting, but bench was always the difficulty. And like, to be honest, I don't really know even now why that was. That you pick a number that you think, you do it in training, you think like, yeah, I got this, but then you show up to the competition and it doesn't work the same way. But it was a learning curve. I mean, my dad used to tease me a little bit about it and say, like, there's 3 reasons for bombing out of a competition, and all 3 of them are that you open too heavy. And all right, fair enough.
But it is a fine line with equipped, right? Like, there's only so much of a range you have to open where you can touch and not bomb.
Of course,
that nice 5 kilo range you have.
Right.
And when you first started competing, were your first competitions equipped? I'm imagining so, right? Because that was kind of how competitions went at the time.
Yes and no. One of my first competitions was the Service Academy Tri-Service meet, which if you ever talk to Matt Gary about it, he'll like to bring that up, because he actually was at that competition. Neither one of us knew the other at the time, but he beat me in that competition. So that he likes to bring that one up. However, he was competing equipped, and I was not.
Okay.
So, well, I put a squat suit on, like some random squat suit that I found for my 3rd attempt squat. It was something like that, Nice. But yeah. Not really a refined competitor at those times.
Right.
Oh, here's a squat suit. I guess I'll put that on. Right.
We'll just put it on for the 3rd and then go up another 5% from what you were planning.
Man, I could tell you stories about being just an idiot with equipment. Like thinking.
That's what we're here for, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the things that you think when you don't have anybody there to tell you any better,
Right.
Like I remember getting this squat suit, and just to clarify, like the stuff that I had learned about equipment had been mostly through reading magazines about powerlifting, so it's like not much at all. I knew kind of how it was supposed to work. They get the visuals of it, but all right, I can figure this out. So I get this squat suit, and I get the thing on, and I start squatting with it, and I'm getting about halfway down, and so just keep loading it up, load up another plate. And at the time, I was maybe a 600, 650 raw squatter, like low 600s raw squatting. And, I just keep adding a plate, and I keep only getting about halfway down, never more, And I got up to like 850 pounds, still only getting about halfway, and that took like the entire training session. And it was way more than I'd ever had on my back before, by far, only getting about halfway down. And that was about all we had time for. So I remember I was sitting in my room later training for the collegiate nationals one year, and I was thinking, man, I keep loading up this weight and I'm only getting about halfway down, and I know that if I can only get about halfway down, it just takes more weight to push me down the hole, right? And a squat suit is essentially like a spring, so the harder you push it down, the harder it's going to push back up. So, yeah, that should work out. I might squat 1,000 pounds at this meet, Yeah. I wonder, like, first of all, let's stop there for a second, because that's dumb enough by itself, But I thought, the next thought is even better, because I go, I wonder if they'll have enough weight at this competition that I'm about to go to. You know what? I better email the meet director just to make sure that he's got enough weight there. So I sent him an email that was like, hey, I'm coming to your competition in a couple weeks, and I'm going to squat 1,000 pounds. I just want to make sure that you've got enough weight there for me. And I thank God that he never replied to that email.
Well, it's not like at that point in time you could look around at the like abundancy of resources that are plastered all over the internet,
right?
And be like, oh, okay, that's not how that works. But
definitely a different time. Definitely a different time.
And just out of like curiosity, do you actually remember what squat suit it was? Like what kind of squat suit you're wearing?
Not offhand. No, not offhand. I do remember that it didn't last. It didn't make it to that competition. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, I was kept fiddling with it and trying to get it to work, and at some point, like, the strap just completely came unraveled, and so I'm a broke college kid, and I remember calling Dan, and because I knew that he sold Titan equipment and he had some on hand, and I remember asking him, what he could do, like if I could buy some equipment from him or anything like that, if he had anything used even, and he set me up with a kit, just like, here, you take this, and he gave it to me, and I think he saw me as a strong kid that had potential and was just trying to throw me a bone, and that helped, because that was the 2005 Collegiate Nationals, which was the only one that I won. So I showed up that year and won Collegiate Nationals, and
it was either bomb or win kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I was kind of in that. I was in that bracket where it was contested. I don't want to make it sound like I was just way ahead of everyone else, but it came down to some last deadlifts at that meet, which was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And do you remember what you squatted?
Like 750.
Okay.
Which, not bad, but when you're talking about like, oh, I'm going to do 1,000, like 750 doesn't sound like that much, but.
So to go back to World Games for a sec, you ended up winning that as well, right? Was that something that you kind of went in thinking was possible? Did you kind of know where you sat through and that was your goal, or was that something where the stars kind of aligned on that day and you were able to go for it?
I don't remember being that focused on placement or anything. I knew that the competition was done kind of with these open weight classes. So, it's a heavyweight, lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight competition, and it's done on Wilks. And just the way that it was done at the time, with the weight class delineations, probably the person is probably still going to take the biggest total to win, even on points, and that is how it turned out. I knew that Alexander Scheppel, who had just kind of eked out a gold medal, and I was a silver medalist at the 2008 World Championships. I knew he would be there. But I don't remember focusing that much, like thinking like, hey, I might win this, or thinking really anything about placing, which, from a mental standpoint, like later on in my lifting, that became a lot more of a focus. And looking back on it now, I feel like it was a distraction. Like focusing really hard on the placement, I feel like led to maybe subpar results, but definitely sub high experiences. My satisfaction with my competition went down as my focus on placing went up. So I suppose if there's a lesson to be learned from that, it's to focus on your performance and focus on your lifting. Not to say like you completely ignore placing, or nobody thinks in extremes for the most part, but
yeah,
that's gonna happen.
that's okay.
But
my
yeah,
dog is gonna bark probably. So
yeah, quarantine life. Yeah, so focusing on performances and our own lifting, I think that's the way to go, and placing can kind of take care of itself.
So, kind of going off that, Blaine has said to me that to him, a title is more important than a record. So winning worlds is more important than getting a world record. And he says the record will be beaten, but you'll always have won that championship. And I took that, that was really interesting to me, because as someone who's never set a world record before, or won a world either, but to me, like the record in my head is more important. And I'm just wondering what kind of like your thoughts would be on around that.
I suppose if I was in a position, like, you're in a third deadlift position and you pull something for the win, or you pull something more for a world record, then I would take the win. And even if the situation was reversed, even if it took more to go for the win, yeah, I think I would probably go for the win. But it does change that calculus a little bit, the way the rules have changed now, because it used to be that you could set world records at national meets, or at least regional meets, but now with world records being only set at worlds, then people used to say like, well, you could set that record at a different meet. You could go to a regional meet and set that record if you want, but you can only win a world championship at worlds, and like to Blaine's point, like you win that and it's yours forever. You've always won. But at the same time, like you've always held the record as well, and with records, the change in rules, like you can't set the record anytime you want. It's got to be at a certain meet. And so, yeah, I don't know. It does change things. And I think that was kind of a way of thinking that I came up with too. Like I came up with coaches kind of saying that to me as well. Like, go for the win. You always have the win. You can set the record elsewhere. But it might just take a while for that thinking to reason itself. I don't know. I hadn't given it a whole lot of consideration lately.
Fair. And I totally get, like, in a situation where I'm coaching, I'm probably going to coach someone to go for the win and not for the record, right? Assuming it's not out of hand, but
yeah. Well, see, that's what I would wonder as well. Like, I mean, you say that that's what you would do as a coach, so I think that's probably indicative of where your values are at. And yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when I sit back now, it's like thinking about it, it's like, well, if I look at something, I'll probably look at the record book, right?
Mhm.
Even historically record book. So I'm going to see someone's name in the records more than I'm going to go look at maybe the 2008 World Championship results to see who won that.
Sure.
It's just kind of, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that Blaine said that kind of made me think about it like that.
Well, Blaine's a perfect example for this because in 2012 was the first Classic World. It was the Classic World Cup, but we all knew what it was. You know, it's the first World Championship. It's not official, but you know, whatever, we know. Anyway, we show up, and I remember talking with Blaine afterwards because he won that competition, and I remember saying to him like how cool I thought it was. Like, you're the first, you know, Raw World Champion in the super heavyweight division. Like, that seems like something special to me, you know, and something that can never be taken away, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is true whether it's the first Worlds or the 50th Worlds. But you know, I see your point as well, and I mean, really, kind of what we're talking about a little bit. It's clout, right? So does it matter too much whether you say like, "Hey, I was a world champion," or "Hey, I was a world record holder"? Like, which one carries more weight with the average person? I don't know if there's much difference. You know?
Yeah. I think the clout, if that's what we're going to call it, is more with the championship, because obviously that's the combination of the 3 lifts. World record may only be 1 lift.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the way I've looked at it.
See, and that's kind of like to your point about the 3 lifts. Like, to me, a total world record is like the highest accomplishment. You might win a world championship, like say like 2008 Worlds where Russia wasn't there. Like Rhea placed silver that year because Russia wasn't there, or at least that asterisk is always going to be in your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you might say, you know, I got silver at Worlds, and no one else knows the difference. But in your head, you might know that, well, you know, if Russia had showed up, if Ukraine hadn't bombed, but to set a total world record, like that's the best total that's ever been hit at that weight. So
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. I wonder if it's changed. It would be interesting to me, like, to track the change in these perceptions over the years, like when they change the weight classes and essentially start the record books over again, if that changes people's perception of what the records are, you know. And then there's like this flurry of records that gets set over the next several years, you know, more than usual. And I wonder if that changes perceptions. I really don't know, and I don't have much intuition around it either.
Yeah.
And then you have things like the 120 equipped squat record that is still a standard from how many years ago.
Yeah. Do you remember exactly how they set those standards? I want to say that they were...
No idea. That was before my time.
Yeah. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think they took the current, like the historic records, and basically said like closest to that kind of counts. So I don't know if the old 125 record was around that, because what's the standard, 425?
It might even be 430.
So I don't know if that's
125 record would have been Kirk's at 1,000, whatever he did.
Right.
You know, and I mean, obviously the dude was something special when it came to squatting. So if it was something like that, then maybe that.
But I know they use the old classes to try to generate the new classes.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they're really comparable. Obviously, 82.5 to 83, like basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to those old days, the World Games days, when I got into the sport, there was a team that kind of walked around in the USA, and they always wearing the green shirts. So what did it mean to kind of be on Team Green back in the day?
I mean, so Quest Nutrition was a company that was run by Sherman Ledford, and he got in touch with me at collegiate nationals, and he did this a lot at teen nationals, junior nationals, collegiate nationals, finding kids that were talented and, you know, trying to show them some support, trying to give them some guidance, you know, basically give them a reason to stay in the sport and cultivate some talent. And so there was a lot around that, you know, that he built up some teams doing that, you know, and they would have a team at junior nationals and things like that, and did really well. I don't remember all the years, but, you know, we had these T-shirts that had all the years that Quest won the team competitions and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, he put together some really fantastic teams, and I think a lot of skilled lifters got their start there. As I kind of veered off toward more raw lifting after the World Games, that just wasn't that interesting to Sherman and to Quest in general. And we've kind of lost touch a little bit, but, you know, I just still see him around competitions and try to catch up when we get a chance to. But it was nice to have the support that he provided, and just a sounding board a lot of times, you know, things that should seem obvious to someone who competes in a sport like powerlifting, but aren't obvious if you're teaching yourself how to do powerlifting from reading magazines. Mm-hmm. It's helpful to have somebody to talk to about some of these different ideas and stuff like that. I remember one conversation in particular. You know, I was talking with him about, like, some of my aspirations and my attitude toward training and kind of wanting to leave no stone unturned. And he had been trying to talk me into using a deadlift suit for a long time, and I was just resistant to the idea. And, you know, we were just talking about competing and competitive aspirations, and I was telling him this story about, you know, like, I want to, you know, do everything I can to be the best that I can, to, you know, for the most part. And he was like, yeah, you say that, but you don't want to try a deadlift suit. Fine, I'll try a deadlift suit. You know? So it was good to have sounding boards and people who are willing to push back on some of your ideas and tell you when you're kind of going off the deep end, or like, yeah, you think that, and that may be true for multiply powerlifting, but that doesn't apply so much here. And, you know, right. Just things like that, things that I wouldn't have understood otherwise.
So kind of going, we're talking a lot of history here because I guess we want to focus on equipped, but we'll get maybe into equipped programming a bit more. But in 2007, you hit a PR total of 1,002.5 and then at the Arnold in 2008, about 4 months later, you hit 1062.5, which is, you know, pretty substantial improvement. I think about 4 months. So do you remember any of the changes you kind of made in that? Maybe you put a deadlift suit on. That kind of, or if you have probably have a training log somewhere you could pull out to try and.
I probably do have a training log. It's probably packed up with my household goods, but I definitely keep all that stuff. But if I remember right, I'd have to go back and look at the competition results. I think I had a really good bench, probably my best ever bench at the 2008 Arnold as well. My bench press, the most I benched in competition, I think, was 633 pounds. And like, I did that once and didn't really come that close to it again. And I'd done, looking back on it, my relationship with the bench shirt was kind of a lot of ups and downs, as it is for a lot of us, you know.
Yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah, like in competition, it was rough going. And then, like, I had this one out of nowhere, you know, close to middle 600 bench, and then not. But then in training, I could manage a lot more than that on a consistent basis. You know, I remember in training for a while, I was taking close to 700 pounds, not touching, which is a pretty important stipulation to add in there, but able to press it, and you would think like, well, if you can get it within, an inch, 2 inches of touching, then it's at least in the sphere of possibility. And then you go to a competition and bench 606, and you go, what happened? So I think a lot of it had to do with the bench shirt, and just if you can get that thing to hit right, now all of a sudden your total is looking a lot better, and it's more than just that, you have a good squat and a good deadlift to go with it. But the bench always seemed the most volatile to me.
Yeah. Well, that's why I opened Raw at my first Equipped Worlds and received a lot of flack from Rhea for it. So for me, I made the transition into equipped lifting just 3 years ago, and had done a couple years of raw lifting before that. And one of the few resources that I was able to find in terms of like, how do you put a bench shirt on? How do you take a bench shirt off? How do you do any of this stuff I've never done before? Was finding some really old YouTube videos of yours, and watching you talking about putting a shirt on, taking a shirt off, some tips for self handoffs, and that kind of stuff. What drove you to make those in that, like at that point in time? Was it, that there wasn't anything like that, or were you coaching athletes that was specifically for? Like what was your thought process behind that?
So it was a necessity for me to figure it out, I guess, because I was training by myself. The video that you're talking about was shot at the North Dakota YMCA. It's a nice little time capsule video. Like you look back on 24-year-old Mike or something like that. But I was training mostly in my garage by myself, and I've got to figure this out. Like, how am I going to train equipment? It's just a necessity. And I remember coming across this video of a Japanese lifter who rolled his bench shirt in a specific way so that he could wiggle into it and just pull it down, and he had it for the most part on just by himself. And that being a real light bulb moment. And that's kind of the technique that I show in that video. It's called solo shirt work, I think. But so anyway, back up for a minute. So I come across this video and I watch this Japanese lifter do it, and I have this light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God, that's how you would do it. That's how it would work. So I go to the closet, I get out my bench shirt and I roll it, slide the thing up my arms, duck my head under, zip, pull the tail of the shirt. It's down. I'm like, holy shit, I got this thing on. There it is. It's on now. How do I get it off?
I was going to say, I feel like I know where this is going.
And I was home by myself at the time. So I remember I was like sitting there in my bench shirt for like 45 minutes waiting for my wife to get home from work. It's like, can you help me? So learning how to get it off by yourself came later.
Yeah. Also out of necessity.
Right.
So at that time, you were doing the majority of your training at home?
Yeah.
And then you would just kind of go to the gym whenever you needed a Sinead O'Connor ballad, or okay.
Whenever it was convenient. So like I did this, it took me a while to get my home setup put together. But what you were talking about, the I've got a video of me squatting 900 double with Sinead O'Connor in the background. That was just prior to me getting my home gym set up.
Oh, okay. So you did train at a commercial gym, like somewhat extensively?
Yeah, that was actually, when I first got there, that was the closest I've ever been to getting kicked out of a gym. Which another bit of history, right? Like that used to happen pretty regularly to powerlifters who would go to commercial gyms. It would be like, hey, there's no deadlifting in here. And I think a lot of powerlifters acted kind of like assholes. And like in all my time traveling and lifting in commercial gyms, I never had a problem except for this one time. Right. And it's that this was at the North Dakota YMCA, and they have the weight room on the second floor of this giant building, And so I'm in there and I'm deadlifting, and I was deadlifting. It was like middle 700-pound range. So it's enough weight, and they've got a deadlift platform and everything. Deadlifting is definitely okay here, but it's enough weight that when you put the bar down in any sort of sensible fashion on the second floor, you get these shock waves that go across the entire building, and it makes you feel like the building's going to collapse. And so Timmy, personal trainer, came over and started demanding that I set the bar down more gently. And well, I am setting the bar down gently. Well, no, you're not. This is what's happening. And things escalated, and it ends up with me yelling at him, "Why don't you get up here and show me how to put the bar down more gently?" And another guy who was also he's a local there, also a powerlifter. His name's Bob Bruner. He stepped in and intervened because he knew the guy, and he could also see that I knew what I was doing. I wasn't just some jerk who was dropping weights. And so he was like, "Hey, kind of calm things down," and everything turned out fine. Bob became a friend after that, and that was really cool. But that another old days story, I guess.
No, that's perfect. So part of the reason I wanted to ask about that was, I mean, obviously you did things like middle 700 deadlifts at commercial gyms and 900-pound doubles at commercial gyms. Were you of that sort of school of thought that, like, using that equipment was a big detriment to you? Using maybe a subpar bar or something less than what you would normally have at home? Or were gyms better equipped? Like, did you notice any difference? Do you think you would now?
Definitely noticed the difference. And I mean, it was kind of a thing I didn't think about too much because it wasn't really an option. I would have used better equipment if I was able to, but just most of the time it wasn't available. But I remember talking to Sherman again, and I guess he had been talking to some people who were telling him, like, "Man, can you imagine how much better Mike would be if he was lifting at a real gym that didn't play Sinead O'Connor?" And he tells him, like, "Well, do you ever think that maybe that's why he's doing as well as he's doing, is because he's not relying on those? It doesn't have to be the perfect hype song to go out and lift weights, But I remember talking to Brian Siders one year as well, who was quick Brian story. He worked all day. He worked as a psychologist in a prison, and then he'd get home in the afternoon and he took care of his daughter. And once he got his daughter put to bed in the evening, that's when he would go train. And his training sessions were like 4 hours long. So he'd start training at like 10 p.m. and train to like 2 in the morning, right? Yeah. And so he's in his garage, deadlifting at 2 in the morning. Neighbors tend not to like that,
right.
So I remember him telling me that he had to change up his training so that he was doing basically like really slow negatives for his deadlifts, so it didn't cause any noise or anything like that. And I was like, "Man, that sucks. Sorry, you've got to deal with that." And he's like, "No, actually, I think my deadlift is better. Like, it feels better than it ever has, and I can't point to anything else. So it seems like maybe that's it,
Yeah.
But, well, sometimes the constraints make the path more clear,
Totally. I think that's a cool perspective, and maybe something that more people could spend more time thinking about, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, to I guess go back offer the other perspective as well.
Yeah.
At the 2013 Worlds, the Classic Worlds, I had been training all my deadlifts on a Texas power bar, which is a stiff bar, I guess, by most standards. It's definitely not a deadlift bar, but it's a 28 millimeter bar. So it's got a little bit more flex, and it's a little bit narrower than the Eleiko, which is 29 millimeter. So it had never caused any problems before ever, but I showed up at the 2013 Worlds and all of a sudden had grip problems, and I dropped two deadlifts and missed out on a world championship because of it. And after that, I got an Eleiko bar and started training on a 29 millimeter bar.
Yeah.
And the grip it's not like it went away completely, but it definitely lessened a lot. You know, and I think some differences in equipment are more consequential than others, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, if all you've got is a 28 millimeter bar, then you're going to train on 28 millimeter bar and make the best of it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. So I think we wanted to talk a little bit about equipped programming, and obviously you are a coach, to put it very lightly. But to start off with, can you please just back me up that reps and gear are good and cool and people should do them?
Yeah, I'll back you up on that for sure, 100%.
It's been a recurring topic.
Cool and good and people should do them. I would agree with all of those. I'll also note that you didn't say fun or enjoyable or anything like that.
I'm not going to make you agree to that. No.
Right. Not any of those things, but effective. Yeah, I would say it's effective. I had a neat conversation with Natalie Hansen. Well, you were there for that as well, Bryce.
Right. Yeah.
You know, she's definitely of a differing opinion, and she's got good reasons for thinking that. Like it is wear and tear. It's more reps on your equipment and things like that. However, I think that there's trade-offs to everything, and you know, those are some of the downsides to doing reps in your equipment, but some of the upsides are that you can learn the groove a little bit better. You get a little bit more of a feel for where the resistance bubble is at. And it's a little bit more volume, and it can teach you something about touching, because you know, by the third, fourth, fifth rep, you're effing tired, and lo and behold, you can get that bar a little bit further to your chest than you could on the first rep. Somehow, you know, somehow that happens. So I think there's some important benefits for it, and you know, like anything else, you're gonna have to weigh that out to figure out, you know, what's the best scenario for it. But definitely is a useful tool and something I find myself reaching for quite a bit.
So when you first started incorporating those, I'm imagining that was in your own training.
Yeah.
Now, was that at the time, was that a trend that you kind of had to buck to go that direction, or was that something where you just were doing it and then found out later that nobody else likes to do that?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. Like, is it current common practice to only do singles and gear?
Kind of contested, like singles, doubles. I don't think many people go above like maybe a triple straps down. But that's my limited scope of things.
No, that seems pretty normal.
I would say more in bench, probably you'll see more reps, maybe, rather than, especially like, full gear squats.
Full gear straps up, knee wraps, sets of 5 are not common. I think I can say that confidently.
Even when they were programmed for me by Mike. I'm pretty certain out of the 6 weeks in the block, I probably wrote, back's not feeling so good, didn't do set of 5. Because it would be like 3 lead up singles, then a drop back set of 5. And by the time I finished my singles, my back would always feel a little janky. And I think I might have done like 1 or 2 weeks of 5. And it's just misery.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely miserable. And it's not, there's very little that's like requirements, you know, training wise, you know, that stuff that can't be worked around. So yeah, definitely. And I would agree with you guys that, you know, doing 5s in equipment has always been our rarity. But you know, doubles and triples didn't seem to be a rarity. And I think kind of the way that most people were doing it before would be, especially in the squat, more incremental. You know, that, you know, your first couple weeks when you were doing your 10-8 weeks would be raw, and then your 5 weeks would be with knee wraps or something. Then you go straps down, and then you go straps up with, or straps down with wraps, and then straps up with wraps. Or different people had different gear progressions, because I don't think there's like one fixed way of doing that gear progression. But you would add equipment as the reps decreased in the normal, like, periodized program. But that I suppose that was something that I bucked. Just that I would try to do more full gear stuff more often. Or at least for me in the squat, like adding knee wraps was kind of a last thing. Like I would go straps up without wraps pretty regularly.
Okay.
Straps down never felt like very much to me. It, felt like it just didn't feel like the same movement.
Yeah, and I think my own like sort of attraction and fascination with the reps and gear is partially because I think for somebody in my circumstance where you're coming into equipped lifting with a pretty decent base of movement and strength, it was a really effective way for me to learn the equipment. And I think that's where part of my like personal kind of argument behind it is for people who have maybe already got some experience lifting and want to get more used to the equipment a little bit quicker. Accumulating more reps probably going to lead to that proficiency coming faster. And also because, a lot of people seem to like roll their eyes and say that you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. And I latch onto that kind of stuff and like, oh yeah, watch this.
little counterculture.
A little bit.
Relate to that.
Yeah.
And then with the shirt, a lot of times it's working down boards. Like people work down boards sometimes within the same set. Ryan, I think you do that a lot, don't you?
We used to. Yeah, used to. Especially breaking stuff in, like that's how we would always work down boards to break stuff in, like a 3-2-1 board in a set or 3-2-2 board. But usually, like when I started working with Blaine in 2017, he kind of got me out of the boards. So we haven't done a lot of board stuff in shirts for a while, but I think it's still a good tool to learn the groove and the path. But
I would say that's another thing that I don't know what the word is for it, but I never got too much into using boards with shirts either. I would always just kind of bring it down as far as I could, and I know that I got pushback against that idea as well. And again, I think there's valid reasons for that pushback. That using boards with the bench shirt is a valid tool to use, and like individual differences and individualization of training has kind of become my thing. The thing that I focus on more than anything else. And the board thing fits into that. Like some people feel like the board gives them a target, so they try harder to get a touch. Like there's no way that this shirt's going to go all the way to chest level, but if I put a one board in there, I'll fight to get a touch on that one board. Whereas some other people, their perception's a little bit different. That if the board is there, they touch the board and they may have been able to go a bit further. So kind of whichever camp you fall into, I think there's tools to be used. But that's almost a psychological difference.
Yeah.
I think the argument I would make is that if the board is there, like a one board is there, you might touch it, but you won't touch it in a way that you could recover it if it got to your chest. So you're going to dump, you're going to roll your elbows, you're going to be in a position where if the bar was to continue further to your chest, you would not be able to press it back up.
Yeah.
So I think that's it can be a good tool, but I think a lot of times it can also be a bad learning tool because it teaches you to get there.
Rely on the board. Even.
Yeah. Without regard of actual bottom position.
Yeah. Well, that's a good case too for actually touching and training, because I know that's something that some people don't agree with, that they feel like, as long as they get close, they don't want to wear out the equipment or something like that. So You know, if they're within a one board or something like that of touching, that's good enough. But man, the last couple inches changes everything.
Makes it a totally different lift.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool. Like I think that's one of the things that I've appreciated about the approach that you and I have taken to my development in equip lifting. Now, when you came up with these things, was it a matter of like, you know, people telling you that you shouldn't do something and then you wanted to try it, or was it more like, I don't know, I think that, you know, there's got to be a better way kind of idea, or like, how did you end up kind of coming to these really sort of counter we'll use counterculture
Yeah.
ideas?
I guess a little bit of both. You know, that I would come across some ideas from reading, and you know, really kind of by the time we're the time period that we're talking about now, you know, whether it's reading online or reading magazines or whatever, but there was a little bit more discussion about training and equipment and stuff like that in the online space at the time as well. Mm-hmm. So interacting with a lot of those different ideas, which most of the stuff that was available on the internet at that time came from multiply training. So that probably gave me a little bit of a different perspective on things as well, because if you were training in a gym with other single ply lifters, then your exposure to information is going to be a little bit different than my exposure to information, which is mostly online and from multiply, you know. So it was a little bit of that, and a little bit of, you know, got to be a better way, and trying to solve problems, and really it being, you know, I guess I'll keep my old man hat on for a minute, but a quality of the era that sometimes I fear is lost, or at least diminished, is that, you know, I felt ownership of my own training and my own problems, that if I had an issue, you know, like, oh man, I'm having a hard time touching in this shirt. Like, yeah, you can go and get ideas, but if I come up with some idea and it sounds like it should probably work, then I'll try it, and I don't need somebody to give me permission to try it. You know, mm-hmm. that it's my training, and if it seems like a good idea, as long as it's not dangerous, then hell, give it a try. And what do you got to lose? You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry that that's not as common as it used to be, but that could also just be a perspective thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So contrasting like class or raw coaching versus equip coaching, is there anything that you kind of, any different variables or anything you kind of take into account when you're programming for someone, I guess?
I think a lot of the processes are very similar. It's just that your focus is different. You know, instead of focused on the raw squat, you're focused on the equip squat, and you still treat it as one piece. You know, that it's an equip squat, and, you know, if you're gonna do a weakness analysis on it, then you're just looking at a squat and you're analyzing that movement. It doesn't matter that this is an equip squat, so I need to think more about this or that. Like, the analysis itself should bear that out. So for example, most people will let's take the bench, for example. Most people are weaker near the bottom off the chest when it comes to raw benching. But then you put a bench shirt on, and that weakness usually moves up. You see more lockout issues with shirted benching. Well, if you just watch a video of someone benching and address the weakness where it shows up, then it kind of doesn't matter if it's equipped or raw. I mean, there's other things to consider. Like we said, reps in equipment is terrible. So there's also where you might squat raw multiple times a week or bench raw multiple times a week. You kind of can't do that in equipment for a few reasons, and one is just that it's hard on the skin. You know,
mm-hmm.
it's just you got to give yourself some time to heal from those sessions. So there's some differences like that. Like it drives a few differences to changes in frequency or reps or something. You're a little more constrained in terms of protocols. So like I like to use different intensities between blocks. So if this block is focused more on, say, singles, in general, I would like to focus on something else in the next block, but that gets difficult to do with equipped lifting because you do need to focus on singles a lot, because as soon as you start doing reps, it gets harder to be technically correct in the sense of actually hitting depth or actually touching. So it's a lot harder to touch a double than it is to touch a single. So singles need to be a lot more present in equipped lifting, regardless of what we said about reps and stuff like that. Most of the equipped training that I write anyway, is still singles. And it does make it difficult from one block to the next. Where do you go from there? If you're raw, then you've got a lot of options, but with equipped, it's a little bit more. It's not that there's nothing you can do about it, but your options are a little more constrained.
Another thing that I think I've heard you say was you used to track your uses in a given piece of equipment, right?
Yeah.
So you would, after a certain point, something would be deemed like a training shirt as opposed to a meat shirt. We have one last. Do you have any hard time constraints today, by the way, Mike?
No, not really.
Okay. So I think our final question before we get into some more like gear specific questions is, what is a potato? Was it actually a potato? And why is it in your gym?
Fantastic.
Answer the question, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, a potato is a plant that grows underground. It's used for food and occasionally lighting light bulbs. You guys know about that, right? Like the grade school science experiment. Anyway, bad joke. So my daughter, since the quarantine, the kids are home all the time, and so they come out to the garage with me a lot to train, and I was getting ready to do a set, and she's sitting there with her little tablet that had some video of singing potatoes. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4. And she is, I guess, very excited that she recognized them as potatoes. She's 2, and she's sitting there going, "It's a potato." My son's running around like a crazy person, but she's sitting there going, "It's a potato, it's a potato," and I'm just like, it's very distracting. All right, no more. It was very distracting, and I don't know. I'm getting set up, and I just said, "Okay, it's a potato." And as soon as I said that, she stopped, and I did my set, and it was fine. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite things that I saw that week.
Can I have a bowl of grapes?
Yeah. I mean, I want a bowl of grapes too, so.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Snack time.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about was some like equipment specifics. So we have a segment we call Gearhead, and we wanted to ask basically about the equipment that you use when you were in equipment. What you like to use, whether stock or custom, sizes if you know it, just to kind of give people an idea of what people are using, what people like and why, and to get into the sort of equipment itself specifically.
So let's see. I used a katana. I don't think it was anything special. I don't know if that's coming through. Maybe I ought to fix this problem. Would that be a problem if I
No, go.
No, by all means.
take 2 minutes here? Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Snack time seems to be over. I did not bring enough to share with the class, so
Oh.
bummer. So where were we? We were talking about equipment.
Yeah. So like what you wore, what you liked about it, etc.
Sure. I remember using regular katana, 48 chest and a 50 sleeve, and I think that was about the only alteration I made to it. I don't know if that's good or if I would do it the same way again.
Right.
But that's how it was then. I know that kind of the prevailing wisdom at the time was that, you know, the chest panel needed to be tighter and things like that, which I understand is not the way that things are going anymore. And if I was to dabble in gear again, I think I would try it. I would try a slightly bigger chest panel on a tighter sleeve and see if that allowed me to stay in position a little bit better. You know, kind of thinking about the. Go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, I think the wording you meant to say was when, not if. There.
True. I mean, I've been known to break out the bench shirt now and then. You know, and it's definitely fun. It's a different challenge. You know, but yeah, it would be something that I would be interested in trying. You know, like thinking about, I mentioned earlier, like the deadlift suit and my reluctance to try it out. I mean, I did try it out and gave it a real bona fide effort, but ended up never really getting any. It helped. The deadlift suit helped me pull, but it also pulled me out of position so that I was not in a strong position. And the net effect ended up being I deadlifted about the same with worse mechanics in a deadlift suit. So I just never fully adopted it. I felt something like that in the bench, that, you know, I was never able to quite get as much of an arch or pin my shoulder blades quite as much as I wanted to with the bench shirt on. And I don't know if that had anything to do with the way that I was sizing my shirts or not. But, you know, I would definitely try something a little bit different there. I don't remember too much about sizing for the squat suit, but it was a Centurion. So use Titan gear for pretty much my whole equipped time. You know, Pete was always really good to me at Titan, and really went above and beyond. I remember, you know, when I first picked up that sponsorship, again, to being kind of young and dumb and not really understanding what was going on, you know, he's like, hey, just send me a list of stuff and I'll send it to you. And so, man, I sent a effing Christmas list to Pete, and like they included stuff like a Boss, a multiply squat suit and stuff like that.
Oh,
like, hey, yeah, I'll try it out, you know. Man, he was always very generous and accommodating. And I mean, there's another thing I wouldn't play the same way again. wouldn't try to wear out my welcome, at least. But yeah.
So going back to your tracking of uses in equipment,
Yeah.
do you remember what you kind of looked at as far as like the 30th time I use a bench shirt, or what, do you remember kind of?
For me, I think on the bench shirt, it was probably closer to the 5th or 6th time. And
Man,
then in the squat suit, it was like a 9th time.
You must have really worn out your welcome with I got 6 uses out of a bench shirt.
Well, not too bad, because I kept them all, you know. And so even after, like, I found like my best sessions were on, say, the 5th or 6th session, but it was still useful and definitely useful for far after that, you know. And I mean, I've said this before too. If I was going to start taking equipped lifting seriously again, I would buy a sewing machine and figure out how to do my own alterations, because I think, one, I would get a lot more out of the equipment, and I think that's just a really interesting aspect of the game that I haven't dabbled in at all. You know, the alterations piece, but then the materials piece as well. That you have this material that does stretch. You know, it stretches a little bit, and over time, you know, it fits a little bit looser. But as you get some of that stretch out of the material, it's not like it's just going to keep on stretching forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at some point, you're going to kind of hit bottom on the elasticity of the material, and I wonder what that does. What's that like? You know, so it would be fun to tinker with some of the alteration stuff, like both in terms of fit and in terms of like just the material properties. You know.
Yeah. That was actually the next thing we were going to ask, was whether or not you did your own modifications, and if so, like what you liked to, you know, whether you were a tight sleeves or tight straps, or you didn't do any of your own modifications from the sounds of it?
No.
Okay, so we kind of covered a lot of gear stuff there. I think we'll move on to some questions from listeners, and in kind of essence of time here, we'll just kind of narrow down to like the most important one I have. And that is being on an Equipped Powerlifting podcast, your official announcement that he's coming out of equipment retirement.
Ooh.
And that's from Rhea, just so you know. She said we need to keep working on you, because she says she's been working on you.
Yeah, well,
Coming back to World Games 2022.
it's like the first rule of improv is to you don't say no. And
yes,
improv.
and
Yeah, so I don't know. I would like to. So kind of the backstory on that is I started getting this hip pain that, you know, caused me to take a step back from competing in general. I found that I was able to. There's a potato, by the way. I found I was able to train equipped squatting, and it was fine. So that's good news. But deadlifting, there wasn't really much way around that.
yeah.
I did a block of equipped training. I intended to go to the U.S. Nationals and stuff like that a few years ago, and then had a family emergency that prevented that. But it's definitely not off the radar, you know. But I would want to, I guess, just feel good about doing the movements. Feel like I'm not causing myself any kind of harm. If I can do that, then yeah, I'd definitely be back. I mean, to get another shot at going to a World Games, I mean, especially now, like I said in the beginning, like I feel like I almost didn't sufficiently appreciate it at the time. So the prospect of going back and you know, bringing a more mature, eyes open attitude to it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, including myself, who would be pretty excited about that prospect, and also the prospect of maybe competing against one another.
See, that I'm glad you brought that up. So you think it would be cool. I've had other people who tell me that they they don't want that, and I had. So for a while there, I mean, I've been dropping some body weight, you know.
Yeah.
Not for any specific reason, but just that it didn't seem like a real great reason for me to weigh 270 pounds, you know, just for no reason. So I've just been getting gradually leaner for kind of a long time, but at this point, you know, my weight's getting down a little bit, and I had some lifters in the 105 class who were like, "Don't do it, man. Don't come back here at 105." And you know, I didn't really give it much thought, but after they said that, I did.
Well, I'm all for it if you want to come up to the 120s.
Hey,
I think it'd be cool.
Well, it wouldn't be come up to. I still would be a 120. I'm not quite that light, but
yeah.
We want some more grapes.
Want some more grapes?
That's
Yeah.
fair.
I'm gonna have to send your whoever edits this. I'm gonna have to send them a bottle of something. I think.
That's just Ryan. So
Yeah, it's just me. So
Oh, so more fives then.
yeah, exactly.
yeah. He'll take those as
I'll take
payment.
5s in Bulgarian split squats. That's what I'll take
Yeah,
as a
everyone's-
gift.
Everyone's favorite. Right?
As long as it's not 15s. I mean,
Yeah, you push
Or
that pretty
25s.
hard. You push the high rep stuff pretty damn hard, man.
just on the squats. But I'm disappointed. I thought I could get up to 500 for 10. I'd be happy there.
Yeah.
But then we decided to swap back, so it's okay.
Maybe we can do some rep blocks at some point.
Yeah, let's not write any checks on
Gotten yourself into now, Ryan. That's why I keep my mouth shut sometimes. So we're just going to dive into a couple of these common questions that we ask everybody, and then we'll wrap it up and let you go here. But I wanted to ask out of these questions about some of your biggest inspirations. Now, they don't need to be powerlifters necessarily. They could be thinkers or people outside of powerlifting in your life. But what has kind of driven you throughout your powerlifting career as a lifter or as a coach even, and who has kind of inspired you?
I mean, there's a lot who have, learned a lot from and been inspired by, and, people that I wish more people knew about, and things like that. I, talked about kind of my having a lot of non-success in my early days. I would say Matt Gary helped me out a lot with being more consistent and kind of understanding more about how to be more consistent and valuing that, So he was really helpful to me. He actually coached me. He was my handler at the World Games as well. So that was kind of our first interaction, really working together, and I would say he's been a big influence on me powerlifting wise, ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of more broadly and speaking at this point in my lifting career progression, lifting life even, Bryce, something you and I have talked about in the past has been stoicism, and just now you say that, and I think a lot of people get a wrong impression about it right off the bat. Like, it was just something that it's the way that it mattered to me tangibly, I guess, in my lifting was that, like, even during the heights of my competitive career, I had this understanding that this is not forever, that at some point I'm going to have to stop competing. I'm going to want to stop competing sooner or later, surely, and if that happens, then what? Who am I as a person? How does my business thrive? Just that's a process that had to be worked through little by little over the course of some years. And it's not like I spent a lot of time just pondering, or anything like that, but just you think about it from time to time and not run away from the thought, that it was an uncomfortable thought, so you'd sit with it for a little while. I mean, not unlike how you do with an exercise. So if you notice that, like, man, I'm way worse at Bulgarian split squats than all my friends, then maybe there's something to be learned there. Maybe I ought to spend a little more time on it, kind of thing, right? Not completely different from that kind of thinking. Sorry to pick on Bulgarian split squats, but it was just the first thing that popped in my head.
Hey, look, if your friends are making fun of you for your Bulgarian split squats, they're not your friends.
You need new friends, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. They need to rethink their life choices.
That's right.
If they're that good at them, yeah.
Right.
Use both your legs, weirdos.
But yeah, so that's a line of thinking that has been influential on me, especially as it relates to lifting. You know? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of others, and I think a lot of times it's difficult to point back to those formative events, you know, and I think through conversation a lot of times they'll come up, but it's hard to, like, we all have attitudes about different things, like how should a lifter act, how should a boss act, how should a friend act, and those models are informed by something, but a lot of times it takes some pretty intense conversation for us to be able to bring that out. I will say though that, like, I remember a lot of times, you know, negative experiences are pretty powerful, you know, and I remember my dad used to travel with me to competitions and help handle me and stuff like that, and those are some really special memories that I've got, and I'm really grateful that he did that. You know, nowadays he doesn't like to travel as much, and you know, he's would just kind of prefer to be at home, and that's fine. But I'm grateful that he traveled when he did. But I do remember one year sitting in, like, kind of the backstage area at Collegiate Nationals, you know, waiting for my attempt, and this kid who was in front of me by a couple lifters, you know, his dad was there handling him, and he's sitting there in the chair, and he's got his headphones on, and his dad's holding the CD player, you know, and he's getting himself real fired up for this squat, and he gets up, and the wire from his headphones pulls the CD player out of his dad's hands on the floor, and he picks up the CD player and, like, threw it at his dad and went out and did a squat. And I mean, I know, I'm not saying like this dude is a bad person or anything. I know he's just jacked up, but I thought, like, man, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be so jacked up and so in the moment that I act like an asshole to the people around me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that informs some decisions that you make about, you know, how do you act when you're right there, that hyped up, you know, and that kind of starts to form some of the model of how you are and how you behave. So I guess that's a bit off topic, but
no,
that
I
was
think
one thing.
I think like
mind,
that,
you know?
that answers the question. I mean, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be lifters, and maybe it doesn't have to be people, right? Because like you kind of illustrated there, a lot of times it's experiences that sort of form and shape these things for us. Yeah.
And it happens slowly over long periods of time too, that, you know, I mean, that's something that kind of comes up a lot, you know, as you just interact with people over the years, is that the person that you are today isn't going to be the same person that you are in 5 years or 10 years, or at least you hope not. And the same goes for other people too, that the kind of person that they are now is not the same as they'll be later.
No, I think that's good. Like, we have some other questions, but I think that's just a really good ending point. Like, I don't know, it's a real positive kind of look at how lifting is lifting, but it's so much more about the experience, the you know, the time spent with family or stuff like that, right? The lifting is almost just like a vehicle towards that. So I think that's really really cool.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Thanks for bearing with me through my
absolutely, man,
family events here.
Absolutely. I would do it again, and I think it's absolutely worth it to be able to for you to let us take up some of your time and to chat with us, because I think there's a lot that you have to share that hopefully a lot of people who are thinking about and getting into equipped lifting will consider.
Yeah, right on, man.
So thanks again for your time.
Really enjoy your all's podcast, and I hope you guys keep doing it, and hope that the equipped side of things continues to, you know, come back and flourish.
Yeah.
Cool.
So do we.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Take care.
See you, Mike.
All right. We want to thank you for listening to the Equipped, Bruised, and Tired podcast. We're going to be available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are found. So make sure to leave your 5-star rating if you enjoyed the show and a review as well, and or check out our video version of the show on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions for ourselves, guest suggestions, or questions for our guests, you can go ahead and contact us at equippedbruisedtired@gmail.com, and make sure to do your part to spread the word of the Equipped Renaissance. We'll see you next time.